Hello and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today I'm back in the UK, not quite sure where in the UK, but I'm talking to Tansy Hoskins about her new book. Well, we'll get there. But first of all, maybe Tansy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So thank you, Nick. And I can let you know that I'm in London in the UK. It's not quite as hot as it has been, thankfully. I'm a investigative journalist. I investigate the fashion industry, and I've been doing that for over 10 years now. So looking at garment factories, shoe production, recycling, and now secondhand clothing.
Because your new book is The Charity Shop World. Before we get into that,
Yeah.
I would like to hear a bit more about your previous books.
Yeah.
Because reading about them, I realized I have to read those as well. So you started out with writing about anti-capitalist fashion.
Yeah. So I've been writing overall about the fashion industry since about 2010. So blogging and writing about it. I was writing about things that I was interested in, and then it turned out there was an audience for that. And at that time, it was very, very rare for anyone to put the words capitalism and fashion next to each other. Capitalism was the lens through which I wanted to explore the fashion industry, and fashion was the lens through which I decided to explore capitalism as well. So in 2014, I published a book with Pluto Press that was called Stitched Up, the Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion. And that I handed that in a few days before the collapse of the Rana Plaza factory complex in Bangladesh, and it came out a year later. Then I went and that kind of opened loads of doors, and I became like a professional journalist, and I got to write for lots of papers, most notably The Guardian. I wrote a lot for The Guardian. So I didn't write another book or publish another book until 2020. And that was when I published Footwork, What Your Shoes Tell You About Globalization. And that was literally a deep dive, 80,000 words on the footwear industry, how they're made, the ancient, sort of prehistoric history of shoes, the shoe factories in the modern day world, and then what happens to shoes after we use them, plus loads of stuff on like the cultural significance of shoes. And I loved writing that book, and that one came out in March 2020, so as the pandemic happened. So I cancelled my book launch. My book launch was done online. My book tour was cancelled. So I feel like Footwork is kind of the one that got away. I love that book, but it's not as well known as my other books. I would love it if you read that one. And then I was invited by Pluto Press to rewrite Stitched Up, and that became the Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion, and that is 60% new material, a total update, almost a decade on. And then after I'd finished that, then I got the idea for Charity Shop World whilst I was in a charity shop. And decided to pursue that. And the reason I've only, in inverted commas, written 4 books is because it takes an incredible amount of time to do the proposal, get somebody to agree to publish it, and then research and write it. So I'm not a fast producer of books. I'm a slow, steady, deep researcher kind of author. But yeah, that's my catalogue.
I guess writing books like this in a serious manner, you have to have all the references right and have to have done the research, and because you don't want to have published it and people are saying, "Hang on, that's not right." Because I mean, the reference section in your latest book is pretty substantial.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't explain really how much work it takes to publish a non-fiction book, like an investigative non-fiction book, where you are, like naming and shaming people, and and being a bit spiky and going against the grain. Like there is so much that goes into that, uh, like like both the research, the writing, editorially, and then the legal hurdles. It was like literally the legal hurdles to get Charity Shop World into print have been huge. It's a whole other job
Wow.
in itself, just to be able to say the things that I say uh, in the book. Um,
Is that to make sure there's no comeback later on, or
yeah, to make sure that what I am saying in the book is true, and so I am protected against defamation claims, basically. And as you know, in this book, I have investigated some very powerful people and organizations. So um, it was extremely important to make sure that it's watertight. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I can see why that would be.
Yes.
Um, Now, I think it's very likely we're going to have to come back to the first books later on. But you found yourself in a charity shop, and you were suddenly struck by inspiration.
Yeah, I was. I wasn't specifically looking for another like book idea, but it wasn't just being in a charity shop. It was being in a charity shop where there was a conversation happening amongst the shop staff about the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis in the area where that charity shop was in particular. Um, that was just like a light bulb going on, really. I was just like, oh, there is, there's an important story to tell here, and there's something here that needs like digging into. um but once I have an idea, and not all the ideas I've had have become books. Like once I have an idea, I then have to go away, and I usually like research, like, has another book just been written on this, topic already? Is there,
Yeah.
is this just like, there's no point doing this because actually I could just read, so and so's book and be happy with that. And then like actually thinking about, can an idea turn into a book? Will there be enough here that I could actually write 70,000 words, 80,000 words on it? Or is this a like an article? So yeah, it's a long process, and then I have to convince my dear agent, Andrew, that it's a good idea. And usually we go back and forth for a long time because I'm not very good at writing book proposals. So he's very patient. We go back and forth a lot, and then he has to, once he's happy, then he has to persuade or find a publisher who is then interested. So it's like it's a very protracted
Yeah.
process.
And that's before you've even written the first chapter.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the typically the book proposals end up being about 10,000 words long. So they are, and it's intellectually rigorous. You have to sort of shape the book before you've written it and outline, lay out what you're going to write and stuff. So I find that bit really hard, but yeah, it's a good basis to then start from if you are successful in finding a publisher.
Mm. So the charity shop world is kind of a love letter to charity shops, and kind of a realistic assessment of how they're doing and how the future may be.
Yeah,
Is that fair?
yeah, I think that's a really nice really nice summary. Yes, yes. Yes, it's not like somebody said to me, oh, like if I read your book, like, are you just going to make me like hate charity shops? And I and I was like, no, like I love them. They are like a huge part of my life. They've always been a huge part of my life. Like I'm not gonna like this is not a hateful book or an anti-charity shop book. But yes, it is, as you say, like it is a it's a it's still a like a no holes barred. It's a realistic look at what's happening because the model is certainly not perfect.
Now, I have to admit, I can never walk by a charity shop when I am in the UK. I will always stop in for a rummage round, and I love the idea. Um, they have been, some of them seem to be in trouble lately. Some of the big charities have been closing down shops and so forth.
Yeah.
But they have also, I mean, the last 10 years or so, the amount of charity shops has also increased dramatically,
Yes.
as I understand it.
Yes, I mean, yes, I mean, charity shops do go. They go hand in hand with austerity and the cost of living crisis and other businesses closing down. Even though the last figure I saw said that charity shops only make up 3% of retail units, but which yeah, which is small on the one hand, but also yeah, it's very significant, and they are everywhere at the moment, and they're filling the holes in high streets. But yes, they are in trouble. British Heart Foundation is closing hundreds of charity shops or dozens of charity shops. Cancer Research is doing the same. Then only this week we had the announcement from Oxfam that they are going to review all of their charity shops, and potentially over 100 of those might close, and their giant sorting warehouse in Batley might close. So it's really sad. Like I'm finding it really sad this week. I think about um, all the people who volunteer in the charity shop, and who gain community from those charity shops, and purpose the way that I did when I worked for 16 months in one. It was wonderful. It's sociable, it's a lifeline. You meet people, you learn about your community, you're doing something good and positive. And I feel really sad that there will be thousands of people who will lose that in their life. I also feel sad about the holes that will open up in the high streets, as well, and the people, tens of thousands of people who will lose access to affordable clothing when their local charity shop goes, and affordable birthday presents and affordable Christmas presents, and a nice time, like you say, like they are, it's a lovely thing to go into a charity shop and yeah, have a rummage. I was wondering when you said that, like, what's it like in Norway? Do you have charity
Well,
shops
I can
or?
I can talk a bit about the situation in
Yeah.
Norway before we loop back. Basically, Norway is the Salvation Army,
Okay.
who have most of the shops and collect most of the clothes. They're very often profiled as a recycling, environmental type of organization. But I did some research on that, and they're not really, because almost all the clothes they collect are shipped off to Eastern Europe.
Mm.
And their main business is actually work training for people trying to find a job.
Okay.
So it's kind of just a bit random that they're selling clothes and are a kind of charity shop.
Yeah.
The second largest one, they collect a lot of clothes, but that also goes straight off to Eastern Europe.
Okay.
And their shops are basically then stocked with vintage clothing they buy from France, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I only noticed that because they had so many clothes that obviously hadn't come from Norway.
Yeah.
But they were quite open when I asked them about where their clothes come from. So they're collecting tons and tons of clothes, shipping them off to France, and then getting ready sorted clothes back to put in their shops.
It's so weird. It's such a weird model. isn't it all over the world? Like worn clothes being exported out of one country, sorted in another country, sold in another country, imported back. Like it's really like really weird, really broken.
We do also have a few more British style ones, which are run mainly by church
Mm.
groups, religious organisations. They do a fair job on that.
Yeah,
But I mean, Norway has nowhere near the amount of charity shops as the UK has.
yeah.
So,
And are they
yeah.
cool? Do people go in them and are like happy to be there and will like post about it and talk about, oh, this thing they got from the charity shop? And
Some of them, but we've also seen that rise in prices here as vintage became fashionable, especially the Salvation Army really jacked up the prices.
mm,
And I think a lot of people thought, no, hang on, that's not right. Because given they're shipping 90% of the donations off without even looking at them,
yeah,
they're not giving actual reuse a chance even.
yeah, that's disappointing.
So, but that's just one of the many, many, many things we need to unpack because, I mean, this is clothing, fashion, recycling, reuse. It is a hugely complicated system with so many players in it and so many factors that I often think anyone looking for a quick and easy solution or some smart answer, it's just not going to happen.
Yes,
Because everything's so interconnected, and I mean it's all so effed up.
yes, I would agree with that. There's not a simple
Mm.
solution.
But I mean, a lot of people look down on charity shops, uh, and a lot of people think, "Oh, I'd never wear secondhand clothes or something that's been used before." But as you point out in the book, there is historical precedence for selling and using secondhand clothes, which goes way, way back. Can you tell us a bit about
Yeah,
that?
this was one of my favorite bits of the book, um, to research. And you spoke a bit about the references in the book. And yeah, part of the reason I always have so many references in the book is because I'm always kind of um, I don't know, like showcasing the work of incredible scholars who've come before me and looked into these kind of things. So, but I was so interested to read about the way, essentially, the secondhand clothing industry is as old as the concept of fashion. So, and the way that the secondhand clothing industry allowed fashion to exist because it allowed people, and we're talking here, sort of Renaissance Florence and things like that, where people would have the most extraordinary garments, and gowns and suits that they would wear with, like, you know 15 different styles of detachable sleeves and pleated velvets and silks and in, like, turquoise and gold and brocade and all kinds of just extraordinary clothing. But part of the way the rich were able to keep affording these extraordinarily expensive flamboyant clothing is because they could sell the stuff that they'd worn already, and they would sell it to very, very specialist secondhand clothing merchants who would then sell it on. And so the money that came back to the super rich was then what then drove fashion forward, and it also allowed those ultra expensive fancy styles to trickle down, to the next layer of society, and then the next layer of society. So yeah, I mean, there's always been clothing resale as part of the fashion system.
So that would mean that even back then there were fashions. So obviously the super rich, what's their fancy thing with 15 detachable arms was out of fashion. They needed the new stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the more a society is class based, the more fashion there is, because I see it as a way of the rich to demarcate themselves off from the middle classes and the poor. So as soon as people, quote unquote, beneath them start catching up, it's time to, it's time to move on. Like, they don't want to be wearing the same things as everybody else. And yeah, for me, fashion is changing styles of clothing worn by groups of people. It's that simple. And definitely, yeah, in medieval Florence, they very much had fashions, and like extraordinarily flamboyant and exciting fashions, that where a dress would be enough to like feed a village for 6 months, like that, that kind of level of flamboyance in clothing.
Mm. Different times now. I mean, that flamboyant dress is today's skinny jeans, or um, there's not the same sort of values at work there.
Yeah, yeah, well, and different, I mean, I guess people have different ways of showing that they're wealthy. The way people use clothing to show that they're rich has changed. um and now, yeah, now you have the sort of stealth wealth, um yeah, like looks
Yeah,
and things.
yeah, which kind of works against itself, because if you realise that there is stealth wealth, then it isn't exactly stealthy any longer,
Yeah.
and the kind of sort of luxurious people you want to emulate probably never wore it anyway, because you've just fallen for another marketing trick.
Yes. Yes, much better to just have your own style that you really love, and that you're comfortable in, and yeah, and like yeah, yeah, have
Mm.
fun with that.
Because fashion does have a lot to speak for. And I was just talking to someone this morning about how fashion seems to get such a free pass because it's creative, it's colourful, it's wonderful, it's all this and that. But it is really just the front door to a massive industry which is causing so many problems all over.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I always think of the fashion industry as being like an incredibly beautiful cake, with like pink and white icing and candles and gold leaf, and it looks sensational. But the minute you take a knife and cut into it, you see, the blood and the rubble and the oil. And the trauma and the billions of dead animals and everything that it takes, the chopped down rainforests, and everything that it takes to create the fashion industry, like everything hidden behind this, yeah, really really fancy but really really fake veneer of icing sugar.
Right. Well, that's certainly graphic. Um, Now, I'd like to get into how it was working in a charity shop, but can you talk a bit first, for those who haven't sort of been in British charity shops or a bit unfamiliar with the concept? I mean, what is a typical one like?
Oh, what is a typical one like? I mean, I feel like back in the 90s, they were all really similar, but now they've kind of split, right? Now you have your kind of more corporatized ones. But okay, typical, like a tip. So I'll describe like my favorite kind of charity shop. So you'll
Mhm.
find it, yeah, you'll find it on a high street, maybe of a town, or a village. It will be a small premises. It won't be fancy. It'll have quite a random selection of things in the windows, mannequins with clothes, books, crockery, and then you'll go inside and you'll be confronted with racks and racks and racks of clothing, and they will be all different colors, all different sizes. Everything that's in there will have been donated by the community that you have walked through. Clothes will generally be sorted roughly into like women's wear, men's wear, children's wear, and then likelihood are There's a section of the shop that will be bookshelves. There'll also probably be DVDs, CDs, vinyl. Then there'll be shelves full of crockery. There'll be shoes. There'll maybe be some sportswear. It's a place where the community has put everything that it doesn't want anymore, with the hope that it's going to be sold to generate charitable funds for a charity that probably the people who've given it the stuff to do really care about. So yeah.
Mm. And it's all mostly been donated locally, and it will stay local.
That's the aim. Yes. And within the rules of being a charity shop, you are a charity shop if the overwhelming majority, if not all, of what you're selling has been donated. That's the difference between like a regular shop and a charity shop. Everything has to have been donated, or a very high percentage has to have been donated. Yeah.
I was reading a comment in the Spectator earlier today, and it was very anti-charity shop. Terrible article. But one of his points was that charity shops are so full of rubbish, sort of weird rubbish, because there's these Facebook and Instagram groups about sort of weird rubbish you found in a charity shop. And I was thinking, hang on, that's part of the brilliance of it. You never know what you're going to find, and there's all sorts of weird
Yeah.
stuff. So clearly missed the
Yeah,
boat.
totally. I mean, I don't know what kind of charity shops you like, but I know the ones I don't like, and I don't like it when they've been like really sanitized and corporatized, and it's, you've got rails where there's only sort of 12 items and they're all color coded, and and there's not very much to look at. I find those really dispiriting, and I won't go in, and you find them in generally in fancier places, like the posh bits of Bath, or posh bits of like West London and stuff. And I don't like those at all. Long live, you must be the same, right? Like, long live the weird art that you find in charity shops, and the
That's what makes it fun. I mean, we still have jumble sales here,
yeah.
and show me that meter high pile of clothes on a table there. Let me get stuck
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
That's
I
brilliant.
think we're on the same page. Like, I went to for my summer holiday, included going to a giant car boot sale in a field that is it's always huge, and it's like that. It's anarchic, and so much
Mm,
fun. Even if you don't buy anything, just to see things is really fun. Like, down with homogeny. It's very boring.
mm. Yes, gentrified charity shops.
Yeah,
What would be
yeah,
next? Now, so you actually volunteered and started working in a charity shop
yes, yes.
somewhere in London, I presume.
Well, I'm not going to comment at all on that because the shop wants to remain anonymous.
Somewhere in the
Somewhere in the
UK.
UK, there is a charity shop that I volunteered in, and I volunteered in it because I was working on the book proposal, and I was basically trying to write a book about something I didn't understand. I'd had the idea. I felt like it was a good idea, but I didn't. It felt the idea and the concept felt quite dry. Um,
Mm.
in Lord of the Rings, um, uh, Bilbo says he feels like butter spread over too much bread. So it's that sort of dry feeling, and that's like the
Right.
opposite of what I aim for. Like, if something feels like that, like, I'm never going to be able to write 80,000 words about something that I'm struggling to write 10,000 words about. So I was like, there's only one thing for it. Like, I've got to go and get my hands dirty. Like, I've got to go and experience this, and understand what it's like to be in the waste stream. If I hadn't done that, I couldn't. Yeah,
Literally.
literally be in the waste stream with my, blue plastic gloves on, sorting old socks and pants and the garbage that people, drop off. I was like, I have to. And if I hadn't done that, um, I wouldn't have been able to write the book. Like it wouldn't have happened. So I'm incredibly grateful to the uh, people who allowed me to go and work with them, and they all knew what I was doing. I wasn't undercover. Everybody knew I was writing a book, but very quickly I think everyone forgot that, and I just became another volunteer who just turned up, did their shifts. We would chat about stuff, um, but I was just allowed to be a member of the community and allowed to be a member of the shop staff, volunteer staff, and it was it was really great of them to trust me with that.
Now, I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say that much of the book is pretty bleak, and a fair amount of that is sort of stuff we do know a bit about from before. But the interludes where you report from working in the charity shop are wonderful and really enjoyable. And I was reading them and I was thinking, you could do a whole big book just about working in a charity shop, like the Scottish bookseller guy
Oh
who's
yeah.
selling millions of books. I mean, I won't ask for any percentages, but that's an idea you can take and use because that was just wonderful. The human interactions, the truths, observations, really nice.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Like you never know, how it's gonna come across. But I just tried to really faithfully report it, and I just I loved being with like some of the people, like Joan in particular, the volunteer who I started uh, working with, and just all the like funny things that she would say, and I just always wanted to make that come through, and just to make sure that you know that like Joan and the other volunteers and the managers in the shop were the heart of the book, and their experiences and their there's like wisdom and wisecracks and and like just sort of companionship, came across.
I think probably for many people reading it, it's also very instructional because when you get into the contents of the bags that arrive, both the condition, the seasonality of it, I mean, the stuff people donate coming in with a straight face and dropping off their bags. I mean, clearly there is some educational requirement here to make people actually donate proper stuff.
Yes, it was at times like horrifying, and quite incapacitating. Um, the sort of dealing with the things that people would drop off, where it was like it was just rubbish. You felt like people had just emptied, you know just like their old, that annoying drawer that everyone has in their house that's full of, I don't know, old screws and batteries and novelty shot glasses and just crap, and they just emptied it into a bag
Mm.
and handed it to me, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with this stuff is not sellable. um Most of the stuff you're like, god, this stuff shouldn't even exist. Like the thought that the precious materials of our planet have been used to make this trash, was constantly dispiriting. So yeah, it was very difficult, and the clothes that would come in with the labels still attached, or the clothes that would come in that were dirty. People hadn't couldn't even be bothered just to run them through the washing machine before giving them to me, and to the shop. So yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I really do hope that this book has an educational value to it. Actually, I hadn't specifically thought about that before, but I really hope it does, because um, it doesn't take much to change something from a dirty, unsellable garment into a clean garment. Um, that will have a role in the world, that could either then be sold in the shop, or if it is exported, is not just a burden on the like poor market trader who ends up with it. So yeah, it's a good point. I hope it does educate people, like, in a focused way.
Yeah, I mean, even I was surprised at how lucky a garment has to be put on a hanger with a price label on it, because there were so many ways in which it could fail.
Yeah, yeah, but most of them would not have failed. It's like, the one that annoyed me, and maybe this comes across in the book. The one that annoyed me so much was the perfect, like, basically new hiking boots that just came in like caked in mud. And yeah, I suppose I just want people to know that, like, there is nobody waiting to clean your muddy hiking boots at the charity shop. Like, nobody is going to do that. We are getting, like, hundreds of carrier bags donated every day. If you donate something that is a problem because it's dirty and covered in mud, like, it's cannot be sold. Like, nobody will buy that. It cannot be sold. It's going to get chucked in the rag bag, and then it will be exported, possibly to Poland, Pakistan, Ghana, and where it will just be a problem there as well. And, like, I've got hiking boots, I go for muddy hikes, I clean my boots. It's not that hard. So I don't want to sound like really moralistic, but like, please, people, just, like, take 5 minutes and, like, brush, clean the mud off your boots before you yeah, give them to a charity shop. Because otherwise, yeah, they are just a burden on the planet.
Yeah. So I remember at one point you mentioned this young man who comes in with a bag full of hiking gear and stuff, I think, which was all carefully washed and folded and well presented. I have to admit, and I'm ashamed to think so, that I was sure that charity shops actually washed stuff before they hang it out,
No,
but clearly no.
no, I have never come across a
And
charity shop with a laundry. And in fact, I was speaking to a totally separate area manager today, and she confirmed, she was like, she's never come across a charity shop that has a laundry. Like, this is not a thing. Like we,
no,
I took a few things home. Like, I there was some jewelry that I took home to, like, glue the sort of diamante bits back on. If there's a volunteer who who will do that, then that. But there's no laundry. There is no laundry.
no. No, I mean, I'm quite embarrassed to even think so now, but clearly that would add a huge burden into what is really a very lean
Yeah,
organization, because I mean there aren't many people doing the operations that need to be done, so things have to be pretty
yeah,
efficient.
yes, yes. And I think it's also really important to remember that a lot of the time, the people we are giving our waste to will be women who are past the age of retirement. Um, and I felt very strongly like this kind of the model of charity shops kind of replicates the domestic burden that is put on women around the world generally, and we are doing it again, with our charity shops, kind of expecting, that there's a kind of motherly or grandmotherly figure who is just there, sorting through our old stuff. And, like, probably her back hurts, her knees hurt. She's been doing that shift for like 4 hours already. She's overwhelmed by the amount of stuff, but she's there because she wants to, support her local cancer charity or support the hospice or whatever. But, like, we should not be putting this burden like on on our elders in this way, and on women in this way. And then and then once stuff is exported, it's the model, that same model continues. It's primarily like women in countries like Ghana who are then again ending up as like stall holders in markets or waste pickers as well. So yeah, I think we need to really think really hard before we drop a carrier bag off at the charity shop.
Yeah, I mean, there seemed to be a fundamental lack of respect among a lot of people. And I think maybe if they knew more of the reality of how these things work, they might have sort of not dropped off all these bags, because it seemed like many days there, most of the stuff that was donated was just put in other bags and sent for collection.
Yes, and a lot of it was put in the bin, and a lot of it goes to the dump because, like, whatever charity that's happening to will be having to probably pay for that rubbish to be collected as well. So, like we all do really care about the charities that we are supporting, whether it is a cancer charity or an animal charity. Like we care about this stuff and we don't want to, probably accidentally be actually giving them a bill for waste disposal. But I definitely want to emphasize that that this is stuff that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't gone and done that work. So I have definitely in the past been irresponsible and been the person giving garbage to.
Dirty hiking boots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yes, I mean, I've still got my hiking boots, but yes, stuff that is not sellable. Definitely, I've done that, but I'll never do it
I
again.
mean, just sort of go a little deeper there. I mean, there's the dirty stuff, there's the broken stuff, there's the stuff that was never any good in the first place. But then you have things like seasonal stuff that comes at the wrong time of year. I mean, I was heartbroken to hear about all the polyester Christmas sweaters that were also just going in the rag bags.
Yes, they.
Uh,
Yes. Uh,
I mean, I hate polyester Christmas sweaters with a passion, but
yes. Like they are like the the bane of my life. I cannot tell you how much I hate Christmas jumpers. I think they are just an emblem of everything that's wrong with the fashion industry. And people hate it when I say that, but but working in the charity shop only hardened my opinion that Christmas jumpers are just the absolute worst. And you know, if a charity shop is lucky, maybe it has like a lockup somewhere where it's able to keep boxes of things to be donated, to be stored, sorry, until they are seasonally appropriate. But if there is no lockup, like what is a shop going to do with a Christmas jumper in August? It's just like a useless thing. So I would definitely encourage people to be seasonal in their donations as much as they can as well. Just store stuff. Just have a box or a bag in a cupboard, where you put your like winter coats, winter boots, winter hats and scarves, Christmas jumpers, and just keep it until October, November, and then December. Donate it when it's like the shop will be like, oh yeah, great, I can put this straight out, and this will be super.
and that would be such a genuine help instead of being more frustration. So I was also shocked to hear, and I've heard about this before, but the stuff that was put in bags and sent off to the rag man, I suppose, how little that is worth. I mean, it's almost nothing. You're basically getting the bin bags paid for, I guess.
Yeah, that shocked the hell out of me as well. Like the first time my manager took a card payment and then showed from the rag collection company and then showed me, and like I was so shocked. And I actually interviewed the head of the Charity Retail Association about 2 weeks ago, and he confirmed that the price of rag over the past decade has dropped from 45 pence per kilo down to 15, so 15 pence per kilo of clothes. So it's it's like, it's almost worthless, like 15 pence a kilo. And that's also why it's like it's so important that we donate stuff that is sellable, because if you can take one thing out of that rag bag and sell it for like £3 or £5, then you've made so much more than 15 pence. But if a hoodie's dirty, it will go in the rag bag and become basically worthless. Whereas if a hoodie's clean, it could be sold for a fiver, and then and that's like just a much better outcome.
Things do get kind of interesting, though, when those bags go off to the rag collection company, because that's a whole dark, mysterious world of its own. I was reading Wendy Ward's Substack this morning. She tried to find out what happened to clothes donated in Sheffield. And that was a very mysterious and murky world of small companies promising all sorts of fanciful ideas of recycling and environmental. But I mean, do you have any idea what actually goes on there? And I mean, these rags are worth something, but in what way is textile waste actually worth something?
Well, if you get enough of it together, that you have several tons that you can then sell for on the export market, like then you do start turning a profit. And I mean, so essentially what happens is the charity shop will sort stuff into sellable stuff or non-sellable stuff. All the non-sellable stuff goes in the rag bag. So clothes in one bag, shoes in the other bag. They get tied up and then, put out the back. And then once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, a van will pull up at the back of the charity shop, and you'll load all the bags into the van, and off it will drive. And it will generally drive to the outskirts of London or the outskirts of Sheffield or Birmingham, to an industrial estate where there will be a warehouse. And in that warehouse, there'll be a conveyor belt, and there'll be a line of people on each side of the conveyor belt. And all the stuff, all the bags are just emptied out. And the people standing around the conveyor belt are basically there, like picking up each piece, looking at it for like a second or half a second, and resorting it. And they'll resort it into hot weather clothes, cold weather clothes, premium or cream, so like the posh labels basically that have a bigger resale value, and then rag. And then all the cold weather clothes will get bundled up and put in a giant bale, shipped off to colder places like Eastern Europe. Poland, Ukraine used to be huge, these those kind of countries. Whereas the hot weather clothes will more likely go to Jordan, Pakistan, and notoriously Kenya and Ghana as well. So the UK, I believe, is still the number one exporter of clothes to Ghana, where we've seen so many examples of the devastating environmental and social toll that our old clothes are having in Ghana. And so once our clothes get to Ghana, they will be in big warehouses. The bales will be opened up and broken down very quickly into smaller bales. Then there'll be a line of people who are like market traders who, and they're like, this is like, this is like a lot of the most impoverished people in Ghana. Maybe they'll have taken out a loan in order to go and buy a bale, a small bale. Then they'll take it to the market. they'll set out their stall, they'll cut the bale open, and whatever is in that bale is what they will sell for the rest of the day, or the rest of the week. And the hope and the prayer is that what is in that bale translates as a profit, and so they can repay their loan, and they have something then to support themselves and their family. But the tragedy is that, as you can imagine, if we've donated like a dirty hoodie in London, it doesn't miraculously get transformed on the boat to Ghana into a clean hoodie. So what this market trader now has is just like a dirty hoodie, and in exactly the same way as nobody in the UK wants to buy a dirty hoodie, like no one in Ghana wants to buy a dirty hoodie, and so that hoodie, then becomes a problem. And likelihood is it will be dumped maybe in an informal dumping site, maybe it will go to landfill. Maybe that informal dumping site will be next to a river, and the pile will tumble over into the river, where it will be swept downriver out to sea and then back in inland onto the beaches, and where it will just clog up the beaches and just be a disgusting, rotting mess of material. Yes.
I was hoping to see the positive there, that the hoodie might actually be clean after all this, but that would not be serious of
Yeah,
me.
I don't think the river the river doesn't clean it. It just, yeah.
I guess the bail economy is a bit of a gamble, that there will be enough value in the bail that you will pay for tomorrow's bail and bring something home for the family, and then just quietly get rid of stuff that was unsellable.
Yeah.
But the fact that it has to go all the way to Ghana before that happens, it's baffling how secondhand clothes can travel the world.
Yes. Yes, it is. Like the UK, like we ship clothes like all over the world. Like so Ghana and Kenya, like yes, all over Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Jordan, South Asia, so like Pakistan. But then we also, Latin America, like we ship stuff to Chile. We ship old clothes to Jamaica. We even ship old clothes as far as New Zealand. Like we are like there is like a spider web of old clothes exports from the UK going absolutely global. It's bonkers.
How on earth is there that much clothes in the UK to be able to ship off to all these places? There seems to be an insane supply and demand
Yeah,
situation
I,
here.
I mean, we are like here in the UK, we are a massive outlier in terms of consumption. So, like off the top of my head, the three biggest exporters of secondhand clothing are the USA, the European Union, and China. And then, bizarrely and horrendously, in fourth place is this tiny island, the UK. Like we are number four, and we are just one country, one sort of
Yeah,
small mediocre like country, but we are completely out of control when it comes to clothing consumption. Like far ahead of Germany, France, like our contemporaries, Norway, far ahead, just wildly out of control.
yeah. So it's clearly just the volume is way, too much. But nowadays, there's also a problem with what is being sent, because it's not even good stuff. It's very, very poorly made clothes,
Yeah,
which then also end up in Ghana and everywhere
yeah.
else.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke at the beginning of the conversation about the closure of many charity shops, and there's a lot in the UK, and there's a lot of reasons that's happening. So, like the resale sites like Vinted are a problem for charity shops. Utility costs have gone up massively in the UK, so energy costs, the cost of staffing has gone up in the UK. The price of the rag bags, as we discussed, has dropped from 45 pence down to 15 pence. But also, in amidst that is the problem that while the quantity of stuff being donated to charity shops has not dropped, the quality of the stuff being donated to charity shops, the quality of the clothes has dropped. So what the majority of what is being donated is fast fashion, and then like ultra fast fashion, slash fashion, Shein and Boohoo, Pretty Little Things, all the online sites, and it's that stuff that just doesn't have a resale value, in the same way that a well-made, built to last piece of clothing does. Like ultra fast fashion is like a mayflower, a mayfly. Sorry, it's it's here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, even with the volunteers and the reduced business rates and whatnot, a charity shop does still have to be a viable business.
Yeah.
And the margins aren't great.
The margins are not great, and hopefully, and in most cases, the charity shop will be supporting the salaries of maybe one or two or three people. There will be rent to pay for the premises. You've got to keep the water running, the lights on. There's the sort of upkeep of the shop, and then there is the sort of primary role for the existence of that shop, which is raising money for the charity, right? So, I spoke to someone at a blood cancer charity today. Like the purpose of the charity shop is to fund like support and research into like this horrendous disease. Or if you're working in a hospice charity shop, you're working to keep the lights on in the hospice. Or if you're at a homeless charity shop, you're trying to support people to get rehomed. Or like animal welfare, you're supporting cats or dogs or horses, or whatever it is, or
Donkeys.
donkeys. Yeah, lovely donkeys. Or your shop is there to like increase funds for your local air ambulance service. Like so yeah, I mean, fast fashion is a problem for our charities. And yeah, the point I make in the book is that the British government over several decades now has run our services into the ground, and has implemented this like horrible austerity across our society, which has meant that charities have had to step up and take on a lot more of the responsibilities that should belong to the state. So whether that is solving homelessness or providing hospices or medical care, that has fallen on the charity shop, and it's fallen on the charity sector, with charity shops as a very important part of raising those funds. So when you say like there's no sort of simple answer, you are right. It's like we need a total course correct for our society.
It's a bizarre idea that the government stops funding something and relies on a couple of pensioned women in the back room of a charity shop sorting bags to take care of it.
Yes, it's ludicrous. It's completely like,
Okay, Doris, you'll take care of the hospice then, will you?
and like there's like the women of the labor of women, and the labor of like older women, is so overlooked. But actually, like this, they are really keeping the lights on in the hospice, or providing like books for schools, and funding like vital research into like critical medical conditions and things like that. It's like, but another reason why I wrote Charity Shop World is I don't want it to be like this. Like I don't want to live in a society that is where people are dependent on charity. Like I think these things should be rights. The right to a home should be a right, not dependent upon charity, and the right to medical care should be a right, and so on, and not a charity.
Yeah. I mean, charity and kindness should be a voluntary supplement, not the main funding.
Yeah,
So, something that I'm reminded of now that illustrates the sort of huge complexity of all this, because a lot of people will hear about Ghana receiving all these clothes from the global north and think, I mean, why don't they just say no?
yeah.
But you mentioned in the book, and I was just, what? I mean, what happened when they tried to say no?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, talk about the carrot and the stick, and the role of U.S. imperialism in this whole model. I mean, yeah. So a group of African nations did get together and try to say, actually, we don't want your old pants and socks. We want to rebuild our own garment industries that are beautiful and creative, and should be allowed to flourish, and we don't want all this secondhand stuff. The backlash that they faced from the United States of America and the Trump administration in particular, threatening them that he was going to kick them out of beneficial trade agreements, which would have made crashed economies, made life really really difficult. Shows you the dark side of, like, quote unquote charity, right? Like the dark side of this industry that purports in America to be doing good, like Goodwill, and the Salvation Army, and all the big, like the very very big charities in the United States. And then when it came down to it, they were very happy to just have the United States exert its political and economic might on African nations, and force them to keep accepting all of this, like, garbage that comes from America, to the detriment of the environment in those countries, to the continued sort of, like, undermining of the garment industry in those countries, because it's just impossible to compete with an influx of very very cheap clothing from America or China or Europe, if you are trying to make your own new clothes in a factory in Cape Town or somewhere. Yeah, so yes, there's a real, like, darkness to this, and a real, like, hard power behind these imports.
That response, though, seems so telling because until you hear that response, you wouldn't think. I mean, it seems so out of proportion um, because sending clothes to Africa, I mean, is that sort of big deal if they don't want them? But then for the president to get involved like that and actually bully
Yeah.
them, I mean, what is it we're not really seeing here?
Well, it's the amount of money that those exports are worth to the American economy, is the truth of it, or here to the European economy, or the British economy. Because what we have to remember is that those bales of old clothes are not just being, like, sent to Africa, they are being bought by African companies. So there is an awful lot of money that leaves Africa in order to purchase these bales, and that money just flows away. It
Yeah,
flows from Africa to America, and what Africa gets in return is our old, pants and socks and hoodies and jeans,
yeah.
and stuff. So it's a disturbing, a really disturbing trade. And I think if we kind of, like look at it, look at it in a sort, in, like, what else might be going on, um, lens. One of the things that I found most interesting and most hopeful and this is, you know, this is thinking about like alternative futures. It is the fact that East Africa could have a closed loop clothing production, because there you have a part of the earth where you can grow cotton. So you have cotton farmers. You have obviously, you know, you have spinning mills where the cotton can be turned into fabric. You obviously have like incredible designers. You can have garment factories. And then, you know, and you have millions, tens of hundreds of millions of consumers and people wanting to buy these clothes. And then once those clothes had reached the end of their life, the cotton could then be broken down in country, you know, in house, and you could actually have an actual circular economy, which is, you know, incredibly powerful, and I think incredibly hopeful sort of, you know, way to start thinking about things. But what that would mean would be a massive cut in profits, not just for secondhand clothing companies, but for, you know, big new shiny clothing companies that, you know, that operate out of America or Europe. You know, everything from Tommy Hilfiger to H&M, you know, that rely upon being the ones to make clothes. But actually,
Yeah.
yeah, it could be transformed. Yeah, East Africa could be its own, like both, yeah, production, creation, recycling hub.
It sounds a bit like a conspiracy, but I mean, it's kind of possible that to suppress a country from having their own clothes industry, you just ship all your clothes waste to them, and then you do that to all the countries you're a bit worried about might be setting up trade in making
Yeah.
clothes. I mean, when you list all the places that the clothes waste is sent to, it is kind of a sort of who's who of places that aren't making clothes, but probably could have because they're a bit similar to
Yeah.
places that are successfully doing so.
Yes. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's imperialism, right? It's the decimation of local industry for the profit of big colonial or neo-colonial powers. And, you know, like I haven't been to Ghana, but I've been to South Africa, and I've been to the, you know, the garment factory district in Cape Town, where you have these like huge and very beautiful also like buildings that were once garment factories in South Africa, and they are now, you know, empty. They've sort of converted into like, well, I went to, yeah, coffee shops and just got, you know, office
Hmm.
spaces, and some of them are just empty still. And you know, you walk through these districts where there was a very different story once being told, where there were, you know, clothes being locally made from cotton that hadn't been shipped halfway around the world, you know, by unionized workers who had decent jobs. And yeah, those industries have been decimated, and a big part of that is, yeah, through these imports.
I was just reminded that the UK does have a history of that sort of behaviour of suppressing, wasn't it India and calico fabric?
Yeah,
It came up on the sewing bee a couple of weeks ago.
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. This is like,
so
yes,
there's, there's kind of nothing new in the world. It's just everything's just looping and circling back, and
yeah.
yeah,
It's a
and no one's really doing anything
Yeah,
better.
you're totally right. It's a very familiar, a familiar playbook that was perfected by the British state in Bengal, and yeah, the suppression of muslin, like fabric makers. Yeah, was really, yeah, like a tragic like start of this story.
Now, I mean, all this sounds. I mean, these are the sort of episodes where I sort of, oh, it's just so bleak. It's just. I recall talking to Sophie Tannhauser about her book about fabrics, and it was just each chapter was more depressing than the last, and it's just, oh God. I mean, are there any sort of rays of light, any hope to be seen here?
I think the fact that we're having this conversation and the fact that we know for a fact that there are huge swathes of people who are interested in this subject. Like for me, that is a ray of light. I think we're at a point where there's never been a public discussion about secondhand clothing exports like the one that's taking place at the moment. And there's, hundreds and thousands of people who've worked really hard to get, particularly in Ghana, in Kenya, and in the UK, to get this issue like on the global agenda. So I think, I think people are talking about it. Politicians are being pressured. Corporations are being pressured. There's very, very few people who are happy with the state of the fashion industry. It's an industry that punishes people, from garment makers, all the factory in the factory level, all the way through to consumers. So I think we are. I think we are at a point where people really do want change. Specifically, with changing the problem like of too much stuff going to charity shops and then it being exported. I think there are like seeds of change happening. There are more and more charity shops who are trying to incorporate upcycling workshops and practices into their business models, and are finding people who want to be part of creating something, a different kind of model. We're seeing more and more and more repair cafes and repair initiatives pop up, not just all over the UK, but all over Europe and all over the world. And I think people are turning much more towards repair, as a way of both like keeping the things that they love, that they want to hold on to, whether that's like clothes or electronics, and also wanting to tread more lightly upon the world. So I think there's lots of seeds of change that are happening, and I think also with the awareness. We are at an interesting point, at least, and I don't know if this is like uplifting, but I do believe that the fashion industry will ultimately change in a very, very radical fashion. And I think that will happen one of two ways. Either number one, the fashion industry as it is now will just keep going, and we will experience more and more ecological crisis, and it will drag us over the cliff edge, as part of this capitalist system. And things will change radically because it will be unfeasible to be able to produce clothes in the way that they are being made at the moment. 80 billion,
Yeah.
150 billion bits of clothing every year. So that's one option. But I do believe that there is another option. I feel like we are at a crossroads at the moment where we do have the option to change the fashion industry and society as a whole in a radical way that we choose. So, so whether, that will be implementing like really strict legislation about how much stuff can be produced, legislating to protect the people in the factories who are making this stuff, so that they are not forced to work 10, 12, 16-hour days just to support their families. So, putting living wages at the heart of the conversation, putting factory safety and unions at the heart
Yeah.
of the conversation, and having a degrowth practice where we decide that actually fashion is not what we want to be doing with the precious resources of the one habitable planet in our entire galaxy. And I feel like we are building up more and more towards a movement that will demand that kind of change. And having experienced, the heat waves and the wildfires in the UK this summer, I think it's becoming more and more obvious that we need like like serious political change. And I think we are in the midst of a movement that is getting towards making that change.
I think it is getting harder and harder for the people who are denying there's a problem to continue doing
Yeah.
so. I was shocked to find out that the director of the British Textile Recycling Association denies that there is textile waste being dumped in places like Ghana. It just does not happen. I mean, does he believe in the flat
I
Earth as
know.
well?
Yeah. I mean, I've sorted that waste. I know for a fact. And I know that the waste that I sorted, some of it does go to Ghana. Like, you know, spoke to the recycling company, like in quotes, recycling company. Like, there is, like, definitely, you know, and we have the testimony and the footage of the people, of, you know, thousands of people in Ghana who are dealing with this, and in Kenya, and, you know,
Yeah,
and
South
South
America,
America.
yeah.
And
I mean, was it the desert where you can see it from
yes.
space? I mean,
Yes.
hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think if we just stopped making clothes now, there would be clothes enough to last a long time? I see some people saying that we could just manage on what is already out there. But then again, it's already spread in a desert in South America and
Yeah.
on the beaches of Ghana and stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know where you find the
I don't know where, I can't remember the source for this, but I remember, isn't there someone that says we've got enough clothes for the next, is it 6 generations or something like that? There's somebody, there's thing
something.
floating
But
around saying that.
hope,
But, and I think, I mean, like, I definitely think that part of change will need to be a radical redistribution of wealth across our national society and our global society, because obviously distribution of clothing, you know, is not equal. Like, I have way too many clothes. You know, my contemporary in like Bangladesh will have a much, you know, a smaller wardrobe and stuff. So yeah, we would need to like redistribute resources. Um, and we would also need to make sure that we didn't just abandon the people whose livelihoods depend upon making clothes. But yeah, I mean, I did get to the point in the stockroom of the charity shop of just wanting an off button, of just wanting to be able to be like, okay, like stop, like this, please, like stop the system, um, stop the production. You know, this is out of control. People, you know, people are throwing away too much stuff. Please, can we just stop? Um, so yeah, I was driven to wish for that through. Yeah,
the business of having to take care of garment workers in the global south is an interesting argument. I think that comes from the fashion industry itself because they say we have to keep buying clothes from Bangladesh, say, so that the workers there have a job. But the moment those workers get good working conditions and get organized and so forth, they move their own factories somewhere else
yes,
to save money. So it's kind of a manipulative argument.
yeah. It's a
Yeah,
weird feeling when you accidentally get sort of, yeah, like commodified or yeah, like imitated by the, you know, CEOs in the fashion industry. And yeah, definitely, you know, definitely we've heard that language being sort of stolen and used by like the CEO of H&M, and things like that. I mean, one of the things that I am really pleased to have worked on recently was like a study of like data into um, how much land mass is it takes to make fashion, how much water and fossil fuels, and critically, like the human time cost. You know, how much human time goes into making all the clothes that are imported into the UK or imported into the European Union. And what we discovered, I can send you a link for this, is that it takes like millions and millions, not just of hours, but of years. So of like human time years, millions and millions of years goes into making 1 year, like millions and millions of years worth of hours goes into making 1 year's worth of clothing. Which is like mind boggling, and that's like about adding up the amount of, there's 60 million garment workers, and it's about adding up all the amount of time that all of those garment workers spend making our hoodies and jeans, and things. But the positive and really exciting thing that came out of that project for me was thinking about the human potential in those millions and millions of hours, like 3 million years worth of hours, and the way that if they were released from making hoodies and t-shirts, the potential of that, like the way people could then be, and obviously I just want to say it would be up to people and countries like, for example, Bangladesh, to decide what they wanted to do with those millions of hours. But if you start sort of thinking about like, building flood defenses or building new energy systems, or like so like ecological agriculture or care work or education, once those millions of years worth of hours were claimed back, you then have this like extraordinary resource, which you could use, to completely transform a society. So I do think there's a lot of hope within the ways out of this garment industry that we are currently stuck in.
Yeah. I'd like to sort of make a little diversion into a more positive topic. Now, you talk a lot in the book about how the charity shops are kind of there for the community, and it struck that maybe they ought to be rebranded as community shops, or like in Australia where they're called opportunity shops, which I just think
Yeah,
is a really good name. I can't remember the reasoning for it, but sort of make it more local. And of course, now that all the big charities are shedding their shops, there are opportunities there for making opportunity shops, community shops.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, I would love that. I would, what, like, if I could suddenly be in charge of everything, I would have like, for every charity shop, I would have a repair cafe, like a permanent repair unit on one side of it, and a giant community laundry on the other side of it, so that everything that gets donated could be, like, sorted out in situ, so that stuff could be washed, and so that stuff could be repaired, and just made to be like beautiful again, and then and only then, does it then go in the charity shop, which is, like a big, well run, well organized retail space, so that people could come, and no matter what it was you needed, whether it was like a wedding dress or a suit or a new sofa, or a power tool, or whatever it was, that you could come to this space, and what you bought would be clean and desirable, and work, and fixed, and mended. And I think that
Yeah.
would like completely hack the model that we have at the moment, which is just very, very linear. But if we kind of take responsibility for stuff and keep it in our community, and commit to reusing like things in our community and caring for them in our community, I just think it would be really transformative.
Mm. We have local efforts where you can, they're run by the council, but where you can come and borrow sports equipment free.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, there's traditionally every Norwegian has every sports equipment you can imagine, but that isn't really the case now. But if you need a pair of skis for the weekend, you can go and borrow it, no charge, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. So I was very touched when I heard about the school uniforms in
Oh,
Accrington,
yes. Yeah.
and I sort of realised you have a complicated relationship with Accrington. Maybe
Me?
I have a friend who lives there, so I'm quite
Oh,
familiar with
okay.
the place. But it was used as well, surprising amount of mentions in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to explore. I basically I decided I kind of chose Accrington, like first of all because it's like it's a long way from London, and that felt really important. And secondly because it was a place where there was lots and lots of public grumbling about the amount of charity shops um, and you know yeah, local articles about people grumbling about too many charity shops and stuff and yeah, so I wanted to go, yeah, I wanted to go and see for myself, and yeah, I discovered um one of the loveliest bits of the book, right, which is about the school uniform banks. I mean, obviously it's come out of it's an austerity story. It's come out of massive cost of living crisis and huge social deprivation in Accrington. Um, but in terms of the community kind of recognizing a need and getting together and working to solve that need by providing free school uniforms for children. It's been amazing. So there's basically a charity shop manager called Tony who has turned a vacant uh, retail space into a free shop in London, in sort of anarchist circles you'd call it, like a free shop where, you know, it's a shop, it's full of stuff, nothing has a price on it, and like if a parent or guardian of a child needs school uniform for that child, they can just go there and get the school uniform, and it's free and there's no questions asked, and it's just in the shopping centre, and the child's not embarrassed uh, by their like guardian going to that shop. It's just like it's a shop, and you just turn up and you get what you need, and there's no money involved at all, and it stops all of those school uniforms as well going off to like for export, because yeah, I mean, what's like our school uniform in the UK is really branded, and and if it gets exported overseas, like it's useless. Like, we don't need, I don't know, St Mary's like school.
Could become trendy in certain areas, of Africa, I suppose, dressing up like British school
Yeah,
kids.
but they would want their own school uniforms and their own, yeah, like their own jumpers and stuff. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I found Tony's work and the work in Accrington really inspiring. I think there should be more of it.
It was brilliant. It was so disappointing to hear that the schools weren't necessarily supporting
I
it.
know, yeah, right? Like the fact that they were selling, I can't remember how much they were selling the gym socks. Eight,
£8 gymnastic
yeah,
socks, I
eight
think.
pounds for a pair of socks. I mean, that's ludicrous. That would be ludicrous
Yeah.
anyway. But in a austerity ridden country, in Accrington, I was horrified by that.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, is there anything we haven't covered that we ought to cover? Anything you'd like to bring up?
I think this has been really, like, I feel like this has been a good comprehensive, like, yeah, like tour of the book and discussion, and yeah, I hope it makes people want to check it out.
Because will you be touring with the book now, or what are the
Yes,
plans?
yes. So I have a book tour, um, so which people can find on my website. So I'll be in Bristol on the 1st of September. There's like a couple of good London events. I'm going to Nottingham, to the Five Leaves bookshop in lovely Nottingham. Yeah, and yes, and then I'll be doing, um, like, I have more articles coming out. You know, we had the Telegraph article come out yesterday. I'll be doing some great, like, BBC interviews, and things. Yeah, we will see. But lots of exciting
Will you
stuff.
be will you be returning to the charity shop?
I miss it a great deal, if I'm honest. Yeah, I miss it. I found it stressful. Um, and the amount of stuff I found stressful, but I really liked the people. So, um, yeah, I might. I had to stop volunteering because at some point, if you're reporting on something, you have to stop. It can't just be like you can't just report on it forever. You have to stop. And I felt like I had, yeah, got so much material, that it was time to stop and actually write the book. But yes, I would like to go back, and I truly recommend to everybody that they go and volunteer in a charity shop. Um,
Mm.
just both to sort of evaluate your own relationship with consumption and expulsion, and also just to experience the waste stream and see what it tells you about your local community, um, and the world that we live in. So I fully recommend going and having a volunteer.
That sounds like a wonderful way to end. Yeah. Although, I mean, Tansy's Charity Shop Chronicles, I mean, that could make you as a major popular author.
Yeah, I mean, I did like, yes, I loved writing the book. So yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Okay, Tansy, thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
me today. It was I loved the book, really enjoyed it, and I loved talking to you. It's been
thank
absolutely
you.
great, and I think we may have to do something on your other books as well because I think there's lots of good conversations to be
Oh,
had
that's
there.
great. Well, yeah, thank you so much. This is my first podcast for the book, and it's been just like wonderful and great to have this discussion and such a like thoughtful questions. And I'm really glad you enjoyed the book. So thank you.
Brilliant. Bye bye for now, Tansy,
Bye.
and best of luck with the book
Thank you.
tour.